All right, so yesterday we reviewed the first 2 units. We'll quickly review physics, okay, and talk just a little bit about the exam, kind of detail stuff, and then I'll answer any questions you guys have from the course. Okay, quick reminder, overdue assignments are due today, 12:30. Okay, if I don't have them by then, too bad. Okay, remember your final exam, January 22nd, 9 o'clock in the morning. Be here at 8:40. Okay, doors will open to the gym at 8:45, so make sure you're here in time for that. Okay, physics stuff. All right, first thing we talked about in the physics unit was thermodynamics, okay, and systems, okay, and a little bit about technology that came from all of that. Okay, so how many times have we talked about the first law and second law of thermodynamics? Lots, right? Because it wasn't just in the physics unit, it was also in unit 4. Again, we talked about the atmosphere, transferring energy, whatever. Okay, so it's important, obviously, for us to know the laws of thermodynamics, because sometimes we need them as part of an explanation for an answer in a written response item. Okay, when we're saying, oh, well, energy always flows from hot to cold. Well, we have to remember that that's the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, or, that energy can't be created or destroyed. Well, we got to remember that because that's the first law of thermodynamics. Okay, things of that nature. Okay, it's not that I'm ever going to ask you to write that out word for word like it was in your notes. I'm not going to do that. Okay, but it is something that is part of your understanding and your ability to explain certain concepts. Okay, so that's kind of why you need to know that. The systems, open, closed, and isolated. Okay, if anything, that would probably be multiple choice unless you were, again, explaining something where open, closed, open, closed, isolated. Okay, unless, of course, you were explaining something and you needed the systems to explain that. I'm actually trying to think of a case where that might be the case, but I can't. Okay, but all right, technology. I mean, you don't need to remember the who made what steam engine or whatever. That doesn't matter. All right, but the development, that's kind of important in that as we understood things better, we were able to make better technology. That idea, okay, is kind of similar to our discovery of the atom. Okay, is that as our understanding got better, we were able to make better ideas. Okay, so that's kind of really all you need out of that first lesson. Okay, from there we went to, we did some graphing after that. Okay, there's a lot of graphing on the final in terms of from the physics unit. Okay, so you do need to be able to read and interpret your graphs. Okay, position versus time, velocity versus time graphs. All right. That was something we did pretty well, okay, throughout the unit and on our unit exam. Let's make sure that we do it well again, okay, so that we get full marks on the questions on the final. So it could be there could be some in the multiple choice. There's also some in the written. Okay, so be ready to be able to look at a graph and go, okay, that is a position versus time graph, and it's asking me to get velocity, so I've got to find total displacement over total time, or slope if it's just one line. Okay, or it asked me to find speed. Well, I got to add all the sections up to get the distance and divide by the total time. Just you got to kind of go over that. Now, did we have some quizzes on that? Okay, I would say if you're right now listening to what I'm saying and going, that doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, then I would say watch the podcasts of the quizzes, or actually first get the quizzes off the website and try them. And if you don't get them, okay, then watch the podcast of the solution to those quizzes so that you see kind of what happens and you hear me reminding you of, well, remember that you can get this off of this kind of graph, etc. Okay, again, that's the best way to use those podcasts and those quizzes. Okay, they're questions that are like what are going to be on the exam, so let's use them. Okay, so yeah, that's the big thing. I'm not having you construct a graph on the final. It's not a good use of time. Okay, so the graphs will already be made. You will have to tell me, stuff about them. Okay, and that includes structure. Okay, if you recall, on your unit exam, you were given a graph and asked what was wrong with it. Okay, that's kind of the fast way of having me see if you know how to make a graph without actually having to make one. Okay, since time is of the essence on the final exam, expect that there might be a structure kind of question, okay, on your final exam about graphs. Okay, everybody with me there? All right. Okay. V equals d over t. V equals d over t. Scalars and vectors. Okay, do you need to memorize what things are scalar and what things are vector? Yes, you do. Okay, I know that sucks, but that's what you got to do. All right, here's why. I'm probably not going to ask, here's a multiple choice question, which of the following is not a vector quantity? I'm probably not going to do that. But here's what I am going to do. Have a written response question that gives you some details and then says, calculate the total distance traveled, or calculate the total displacement traveled. Is it important you remember which one is scalar and which one's vector? It is, because it influences how you solve that problem and what you write next to your answer. That's why you got to know it. Okay? Everybody follow me there? Right? And those are little things where, that's the difference between, a couple of marks on one question. If you, for example, if it's a distance and displacement question, it could be several marks because you used the wrong method. Everybody follow? Not just that you forgot to put a vector on or put a vector on when you didn't need one, things like that. So important that you know that. V equals d over t problem solving, probably not a written response item, okay, because it's just not that hard a formula, not really worth 5 marks on a final exam. Multiple choice, yeah, probably, okay, because that's an easy thing for 1 mark. All right, so make sure you review a little bit on how that works. Not that you guys have any trouble with a 3-variable formula. Okay. All right, acceleration. Okay, you got to know what it is, obviously, but most likely what you'll see on the final is some sort of problem solving to do with the acceleration formula. Okay, do we have a couple quizzes on acceleration? Okay, again, probably not a bad idea to try them again, see how you do by watching the podcast of their solution. Again, that doesn't take very long. It's like 5 minutes per quiz, so okay, it's probably a good use of time. How big a part of physics was that? Huge part. Okay, the work-energy theorem is, I think, the most important thing you learn in Science 10. Now, I'm a physics guy. This probably skews my opinion just a little, all right? But it is something that comes up in every science course you take from here on out. Okay, the work-energy theorem. If you change the energy of something, you have to do work in order to do that. Okay, you have to remember that work and energy have the same units, but they're not the same thing. Okay, work is a change in energy. We have to remember that. Okay, so you're gonna have problem solving probably that ends up being force times distance equals a change in either kinetic or potential energy. Okay, which means it could set up like this: force times distance equals mghf minus mghi, or it could set up as FD equals 1/2 mvf squared minus 1/2 mvi squared. Okay, now, more often than not, when we did those questions, the initial energy was usually what? 0. Okay, I would say probably that would be the case on the final exam, because I'm not going to ask you something harder than I asked on your unit exam. Okay, so I would say in most cases it's important to understand that this is the setup, but that in most cases that's really not there. Okay, because subtracting 0 doesn't do anything. Okay, everyone following me on that? Huh? 1/2 mvi squared. Yeah. Okay, so definitely have a look over work-energy theorem. Again, there's lots of quizzes on that, okay, that you could watch, lots of worksheets that we did in class. We had the lab, okay, that we did with the rubber band. Not a bad idea to probably look that over, okay, and then probably the energy conversion lab as well, where we shot the cart from the rubber band. Okay, have a look over the analysis stuff on that one too. All of that kind of stuff could be incorporated into a question on the final exam. Okay, after that, Law of conservation of energy. First law of thermodynamics. Energy can't be created or destroyed. And if there's no work being done, then the energy at any point along the path of that object is equal, okay, or is unchanged, which is why law of conservation of energy questions always start out like this. EI equals EF. Okay, the energy anywhere on the path is equal to the energy anywhere else on the path, as long as there's no work being done. All right, so it has to be a perfect world, right? There can't be any friction, because if there's friction, the final energy would be less than the initial energy, okay? What was the example we did most often? Okay, we could be dropping things, but more often than not we did roller coasters. There's a roller coaster question, final exam. Okay, so be ready for the roller coaster. Okay, where you got, part A and part B, okay, and you have to compare either heights or speeds, okay, at the 2 points. Okay, and then 7 was efficiency. Okay, there's no problem solving to do with efficiency, but you still need to know what it is. Okay, it's how much of your input energy is actually used to do useful work. That's an important thing to know. Okay. How do you study for physics? Practice. Okay. Just do some problems from each of those things there. Study your notes on thermodynamics. Okay. Study your notes on graphing for sure. Okay. Do some problems to do with graphing. Okay, you know kind of where the marks are going to be. Obviously, WorkEnergy Theorem and Law of Conservation of Energy questions tend to be worth more marks because there are more steps. All right, but graphing is in both sections of the exam as well. All right, so make sure you're having a look at all of those things. Questions on the physics unit? Okay, I know it seems like we did a lot more than that in the physics unit, but really when it comes down to it, a lot of that was, building up to being able to do the things near the end. Okay. All right, do we need to review Unit 4? Or are we pretty good with that because, well, we just wrote the test the other day. I'm assuming that's all still pretty fresh in your mind. What's that? Yeah, and you still have your review sheet. Okay, so again, from that unit, guys, big things I already told you. Climatogram on the final, multiple choice to do with biomes, energy transfer application question. If I asked it on the unit exam, I'm probably going to ask it on the final exam. Okay, so expect, probably a heating curve question. Okay, I would say those would be the big 3 from that unit. Okay, what questions do you guys have, MJ? Okay. Yes, yes, you can. When you're naming it, yes. In the formula, no. Obviously, we just use the Roman numerals in the name. So let's say I have this. Okay, now I have my pen back. Okay. Okay, so there's a multivalent metal that is with a polyatomic ion. Okay, looking at this, if I want to figure out what Roman numeral to use in the name, okay, I look at what's the charge on nitrate. Well, the nitrate's a -1, and there are 3 of them. That means there are 3 negative charges in this compound. There's only 1 iron. Its charge has to be +3 because all compounds have a neutral charge. So when I'm naming this, then it would be iron Roman numeral 3 nitrate. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So did that answer your question fully, MJ? Okay. All right. Roller coaster question. Okay, so let's say that that's our situation at the end of the ride. When you are 6 meters off the ground, you're going 20 meters per second. At the beginning of the ride, when you are an unknown height above the ground, you're moving at 5 meters per second. Okay, do you have both potential and kinetic at both points? Yes. Okay. Okay, so EI equals EF. Okay, that's EP plus EK equals EP plus EK, but we'll kind of skip to this. Okay, so that's what we start out with. Did I tell you the mass of the roller coaster? Okay, do I need it? I'm not solving for energy, so I can cancel mass. Okay. Now I need to manipulate to find my initial height. So what should I move first? Julia? Right, I should move, well, the m's canceled already, but yes, I want to move the kinetic energy over to this side by subtracting half of VI squared. Okay, so I will have then GHI equals GHF plus 1/2 VF squared minus 1/2 VI squared. Okay, I still need to get HI by itself, so what do I do with G? Divide it. Okay, it does not cancel that other G. Okay, I need to do the operation that is on top before dividing by the bottom. All right, so when we plug in our numbers here then, okay, we'll have 9.81 times 6 plus 1/2 of 20 squared minus 9.81 times, or sorry, minus 1/2 times 5 squared over 9.81, and sorry, I don't have to square root that. Yeah, okay, so when I plug in the numbers there, I should get my answer. All right, so the initial height of the roller coaster is 25.1 meters. Does that make sense, Cole? Right, because mechanical energy equals potential plus kinetic. Okay, if I'm trying to solve for a part of one of them, I have to subtract the other over to the other side. Okay, because then it's like saying the mechanical energy, which doesn't change, minus the energy I already have, will give me the energy I'm looking for. Okay. Oh, please put at least one decimal place on that. Yeah. Can we go over multicellularity? Okay. What part of it? Okay. So the thing about being multicellular, okay, is to be truly multicellular, you have to have cells that are different from each other. That is, you have to have specialization. Otherwise, you're just a colony of cooperating identical cells. Okay, so the key thing there is that there is specialization. Okay, this specialization allows you to obviously be more efficient, more complex, bigger. Okay, that's probably the most important thing. Okay, and bigger without having the problem a very large cell has. Okay, because when you become multicellular, you probably have cells or structures that are designed to transport material like we do. Okay, which overcomes the surface area to volume problem. If we relied on diffusion to transport stuff from our digestive tract to our brain, it would be bad news. Okay, but obviously we have a circulatory system that does that for us, so it speeds it up. Okay, that's kind of the big thing. I mean, in terms of why did it evolve? Well, it had some obvious advantages. Okay, it made things way more efficient, bigger, faster, stronger, all the things that generally are good evolutionarily speaking. Yeah. Okay, what else, guys? James? Lysosomes are the ones that break down food. Centrioles are the ones that, when the animal cell is dividing, go to opposite ends of the cell and send out the fibers to catch the chromosomes and pull them apart. Yeah? leaf diagram. Okay, let me see if I can find one here. Okay, so your leaf diagram. Okay, you've got this is sort of the example of a multicellular organism with specialization. Okay, the palisade layer, okay, that is right in here with those cells that are, okay, tall and narrow, is carrying out photosynthesis. Okay, it's specially designed. Those cells are tall and narrow and packed close together where they can capture as much sunlight and make as much sugar as possible. That's how they're specialized. Okay, your epidermal cells on the top are specialized to essentially be non-photosynthetic, okay, or nearly non-photosynthetic, so that they are transparent. Right, and allow sunlight to go right through them to the palisade layer. Their job is to secrete the cuticle. Right, and the cuticle is what is that waxy layer that holds the water in. Okay, below the palisade layer is the spongy layer. Those cells are kind of indeterminate shape. There are spaces in between them, just like in a sponge. Okay, water and carbon dioxide and oxygen fill and exchange in those spaces. Okay, because those spaces are connected to the stomates, which is where gas exchange occurs for the plants. Okay, the stomates are important because the guard cells allow them to open and close to regulate how much water is lost. Okay, and then you got your phloem and xylem as well in there. Okay, this is what it looked like under the microscope. Okay, when we looked at it in the cell anatomy lab, we were just drawing the palisade layer. Okay, but you can see here, right, they're straight up and down. Okay, and then down below, the cells are very, they're not nearly as tightly packed. You can actually see gaps in between some of them. Okay, so that's kind of what there is to know about that. The cells are not tightly packed so that gases, water vapor, carbon dioxide, and oxygen can exchange in that area. Terry? Yep. Okay, so for plant transport, I don't think that's on this one, is it? Nope. Okay. I'll just draw that one. Okay, so for plant transport, okay, you've got within the stem of the plant, you have the xylem, okay, which travels up the middle. Okay, you have the phloem, which travels down the outside. Okay, the xylem is where the water goes, phloem is where the sugar goes. Okay, so the xylem transports water up the plant. Now remember in that lab where we cut the roots off of the plant, okay, we were trying to see whether the leaves alone would be able to transport water. Okay, now the only forces the leaves can exert on the water is osmotic pulling force. As water leaves the leaf, what does it leave behind? Not sugars. If it absorbs water from the ground, what's usually in water from the ground? Salts, minerals, things like that. Well, when it evaporates, that stuff gets left behind at the leaf. Okay? If it's salty in the leaf, what does water do? It moves to balance it by osmosis. Okay, so it's osmotic pulling force that draws the water to the top of the plant, okay, to balance the salt concentration. Okay, so that evaporation leads to salt building up. Water moves to evaporate it. Because water is a polar molecule, it is hydrogen bonded to other water molecules down the xylem. That's that barrel of monkeys idea that we talked about, where they're kind of linked and they can stick to the inside of the xylem by adhesion, and that's what supports the column of water. Yeah? Okay, what else, guys? Cool. Yep. All right. So a work energy theorem question would probably go something like this, right? Okay, something like that. All right. And we would also have to add in here over a 10-meter distance. All right. In a work energy theorem question, you're either going to be asked for distance, given distance, asked for force, or given force. Okay? Or you're going to be asked to find like initial or final velocity or initial or final speed. All right? Because it's always going to be about a change in either potential or kinetic energy. Okay? But force and distance are always going to be part of it. With me there? Okay. So I'm looking for F. I know that there's work being done here because I know what kind of energy is changing here. Kinetic, it's speeding up. Okay, if it's speeding up, I know that there's a change in kinetic energy. So I'm going to say work is a change in energy. Okay, force times distance equals the change in kinetic energy, 1/2 mvf squared minus 1/2 mvi squared. Now, just so happens that I picked one where Vi and the initial kinetic energy thus are not 0. But that's okay, because we're solving for force anyway. All right. Do I have everything in this question except for force? Yes. So if I want to get force by itself, what do I do with D? Divide it over to the other side. Okay. Then I just plug in my numbers and solve. Okay. So I've got force equals 1/2 times 250 times 9 squared minus 1/2 times 250 times 3 squared. I want it in kilograms in physics, right? It's always in kilograms in physics. In physics, we do things right. Everybody else does it wrong. Okay? The sooner you realize that, the happier you'll be. Okay? Chemistry does everything wrong. Okay? All right. So, well, or in physics, we like to say we go big. Okay. So, and then the distance was 10 meters. So we plug in our numbers and solve. Okay? No, because it could be potential energy. And then I would use MGH. Right? So no, I don't use the same formula every time. This is the same every time. That's the work energy theorem. Work is a change in energy. Okay? But no, I don't use the same formula every time. Okay? What else, guys? Surprised no one's asked any chemistry questions yet. Because for mercury, the precipitate would be formed with chlorine. And also, chlorine is less toxic than sulfate. Yeah, right? If you look on your solubility chart, it should be that mercury only forms a precipitate with chlorine, right? Not with sulfate. No. Terry? Okay. Okay, so for ionic compounds, okay, the naming rules are simple. Metal, then non-metal, ending in "ide." That's all there is to it. Okay. If it's a polyatomic one, like we did this morning there when MJ asked about the polyatomic and the multivalent, then you would add the Roman numeral, okay, to the name. For molecular, okay, the naming rule is, okay, name them in the order they appear. Okay, in order of formula with prefixes. Okay, so I'll do an example of each one here. All right, so for an ionic compound, let's say that was given, I don't know, let's say that. Okay, Ca is calcium, N is nitrogen, calcium nitride. Okay, the 3 and the 2 don't matter because in ionic compounds you figure out the formula by dropping and swapping, and that's the only possible combination of those two elements. For the molecular compound, okay, let's say we had this, okay, S2O3, so I would go sulfur, okay, disulfur, sorry, disulfur trioxide. Okay. They should never be capitalized, as none of mine are. Yep. Predicting reactions, yep. Okay, so let's have a look at, let's say, this one here. if I'm going to predict the products of a reaction, the first thing I have to figure out is what kind of reaction it is. That is a single replacement reaction. I know that because I have an ionic compound reacting with an element. In a single replacement reaction, I have to swap the things that are alike. All right, so the thing I have by itself is oxygen, and it is a nonmetal. So who is it going to switch places with? Chlorine. Okay, so that means that on this side, iron is going to end up with oxygen, and chlorine is going to end up by itself. Okay, so now I've got them where they're supposed to be, but I don't know for sure whether I've swapped and dropped those correctly, or if I have any special elements. Okay, so the next thing I have to do is swap and drop this. Well, that's a problem because iron has more than one possible charge. How do I find out which one it is? Right, look back over here. Okay, you can always tell by what it was with on this side. There's 2 chlorines. Every chlorine is -1, so there's 2 minuses. This is Fe, 2 plus. All right, so over here, Fe is 2 plus, iron or oxygen is 2 minus. So it just so happens that that compound is right the way I wrote it. Okay, because it's 2 and 2, which we reduced down to 1 and 1. Okay, and chlorine is a special element that comes as a pair. Alicia. Yep. Okay, now I look at my reaction, and I've got to start balancing. Okay, right now chlorine's balanced and iron is balanced, but oxygen is not. So I start there. Okay, normally I don't start with oxygen, but everything else was balanced, so I have to. Okay, there's 2 oxygen over here, but there's only 1 here. So what do I put right here? A 2. All right, that gives me 2 iron, so I have to go back over here and correct that. Now there are 2 iron, but now there are also 4 chlorine. So I go back over here and write it 2, and now the reaction is balanced. No, if they're by themselves in a reaction, they get their number. Yeah. Okay, if they're in a compound, their number comes from swapping and dropping or prefixes. Right. Yep. Yes, it will. They are highlighted and in color. I told you guys that yesterday. Types of solutions: heterogeneous, homogeneous, right? Okay, homogeneous, one piece, right? So it's everything's dissolved. Heterogeneous, more than one part. Yep. Okay, combustion reactions are going to go over. They're easy to predict because the products are always and CO2, right? Okay, so let's do this one here. C6H14 plus oxygen. Okay, so predicting those, like we said, it's always going to be CO2 and water. Okay, that's what always happens in a combustion reaction. Special rules for combustion reactions: the rule of 2 and balance alphabetically. Okay, the rule of 2 applies if you have an even number of carbons. Do I? Yes. So if I have an even number of carbons, I apply the rule of 2 and start my balancing with a 2. Now I can balance in alphabetical order, which is the second rule. All right, 2 times 6 is how many? 12. Okay, 2 times 14 is 28. 14 times 2 is 28. Okay, 14 times 1 is 14, plus 24 more is 38. All right, what times 2 gives me 38? 19. Okay, does that make sense? That's what we started with. That's the first thing we did. Okay. You want me to do one more? Cool. Okay. All right. Think of another one here. Okay. Copper is a multivalent metal. It can be a 1 or a 2. What is it in that compound? How do I find out? Find the charge of sulfate. Always look at what the multivalent metal is attached to. Sulfate is a -2. Okay, so that means copper is a +2. All right, this is copper 2 sulfate. Yeah? Okay, what else, guys? Caitlin? Okay, a solubility chart could give you a question from the solubility chart could just give you a compound and say, is this compound soluble? Right. So I would look up sulfate and then look down below. If it's in the first row, it's soluble. In the second row, it's not soluble. Okay. Or the question could say, here's a chemical reaction. Which, if any, of the products are soluble? Okay, and so then I would go, okay, well, which of the products? I don't even have to worry about the reactants. Okay, iodine. If I look up iodine, look down my chart to where lead is, that should be in the second row. This is a precipitate. This is soluble because basically all nitrates are soluble. Okay, this is that one we did in the lab that made the bright yellow powder. Okay, so that's how. Those are the two ways you'd get it. Either straight out, is this soluble, or in a reaction, one or the other. Hey, what else, guys? Don't be afraid to ask. You only have about 5 more minutes. Okay, we can. Yeah. Okay, so if we're looking at this cell here, okay, the big purple thing, nucleus, okay, what does it do? Stores DNA, right? Okay, and I mean to some extent, make sure that the DNA, is doing what it needs to do. Nucleolus, right? It copies the DNA, makes it into RNA, which is essentially it controls protein synthesis. Okay. The blue stuff with the dots on it is rough ER. Okay, rough ER transports protein. Smooth ER is the stuff that's got all the jobs. Okay, makes fats, repairs membranes, makes hormones, detoxifies proteins, breaks down complex carbohydrates. Okay, the red things. Okay, like this. Mitochondria, they burn sugar for energy. These are the centrioles. That's the Golgi. Okay, lysosomes could be this. This is a peroxisome, which is a lysosome with no food particles in it. Okay, the stuff inside is the cytoplasm, cell membrane, flagellum. Okay, ribosomes, okay, float everywhere or are attached to the rough ER and they make protein. I think that's it. The fibers? These? Oh, they're just cell wall protrusions. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. All right. And then for the plant cell, okay, the differences are it's got everything else the animal cell doesn't have centrioles or lysosomes. Okay, so there's your Golgi. Your chloroplasts are different. Your water vacuole, okay, your water vacuole helps support the cell from the inside. Okay, you got your cell wall, which supports the cell from the outside and acts like a frame. Cytoplasm, same as before. Okay, and everything else does the same job. Okay, anything that has in common does the same job. All right. Okay, so yeah, cell transport will be on there, obviously. You've got osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. I am not testing the different cytoses. Okay, so make sure you know, okay, osmosis is, the movement of water across the membrane to balance salt. Diffusion is the natural movement of anything within the cell, okay, from high to low. And active transport is transport across the membrane against the gradient or up the gradient, and it requires what? Energy. It's the one that creates imbalance. So if you need a lot of something and you need it right now, okay, then you have to use active transport. Okay, Brooklyn. No. You will not need to know that. Okay, anything else there, guys? Okay. What do you need to bring with you again? 2 pencils, 2 pens, calculator with fresh batteries. Okay. No, you don't need a straight edge anymore. I took the part about drawing the line off. Okay. So you don't need a straight edge. Something to drink, maybe. No, you shouldn't need any scrap paper. If you need some, you can ask for it, and we'll give it to you. Yeah. Those are the things you need to bring. Remember to forget some things, like your phone and that kind of stuff in your locker. What's that? Okay, the tropisms we went over yesterday. Okay, we talked about that this photo, thigmo, and geo. Okay, gravity, touch, or light. Okay, and they all happen by the same process. The oxygens go to one side, and that side grows faster than the other. Okay. Okay, been a pleasure, guys. Okay, good luck on all your finals, and we'll see some of you in Physics 20, I would imagine. Okay, all right. You bet. Okay, so cohesion and adhesion are both properties of water because water is a polar molecule, right? So we got the water molecule looks a bit like Mickey Mouse, okay? These two ends are positive, this end is negative. If another water molecule comes close to this water molecule, then, because this is positive and this is negative, they will form a hydrogen bond, because this is the hydrogen atom. Okay, so it'll form a hydrogen bond with this oxygen atom. That is cohesion. Okay, because it's two molecules of water sticking together. Okay, so that's like cooperating cohesion. All right, if this particular hydrogen atom is bonding to something other than water, like let's say the negatively charged inside of the phloem, or sorry, the xylem of a plant. Okay, that would be then adhesion. Okay, so they're similar in that they're both a result of a hydrogen bond. They're different in that one is water to water, the other is water to any other polar material. Okay, all right, what else, guys? Charlotte? How to use it? Okay. When do I use Avogadro's number? You use Avogadro's number if you encounter a question like this. Okay, how many molecules of something or how many particles of something are in this many grams? Or if the question said there are this many particles, how many grams is that? Okay, anytime it's got particles, you're going to use Avogadro's number. All right, so right now I know it's calcium nitride, so I can always find big M off the periodic table. Okay, so calcium is 40.08, and there's how many of those in calcium nitride? Maybe we should look at that. Okay, calcium is a +2, nitrogen is a -3, so when I drop and swap I get Ca3N2. All right, so I multiply that by 3 plus nitrogen, 14.01, times 2. All right. Okay, it's 148.26. All right, so that's my molar mass. Okay, now I've got to find the number of particles. To do that, I need N. Okay, well, luckily the formula is set up to get me that, little m over big M. Okay, so we got 50 grams. Okay, over 148.26. All right, so 0.34 moles. All right, now that I know how many moles I have, I can use Avogadro's number. Avogadro's number is the number of particles in 1 mole. If I have 0.34 moles, what should I do with those two numbers? Multiply them together. Okay, so number of particles is 6.02 times 10 to the 23 times 0.34. J23. What the heck is that about? Gonna be that way, are we? No, I entered. I used entry again and redid it. Oh, but it doesn't know that. Okay, I gotcha. There we go. So then we 2.05 times 10 to the 23. Okay. Everybody all right with that? Okay. Other questions? All right. Well, then you got a bit of time to. Sorry, Jake.